So we're going to welcome our next storyteller to the stage, Michelle Fecteau. Fecteau, did I say it right? Yes, come on up, round of applause, loud people, loud, we're loud here.
Oh, good, how are you? Okay. So after my dad died on September 24th, closer? Okay, on September 24th, 1980, with a bag of, he died of a massive heart attack with a bag of Dunkin' Donuts in his hands. Yes. I gave serious thought to following in his footsteps, not his diet, but his calling in life. You see, my dad was a union man. He was a teacher, and he was president of his local union. And he was a good man. Bad diet, good man. And there was a few things that really impressed me in my growing up near him. I went to work with him every once in a while, and I remember as clear as day, I'm in one room sorting books for him, and he's in the next room, and he's yelling, and another man is yelling back, and they're really upset. And I'm listening to what they're saying. I have to hear this. And I'm shocked to hear that he's yelling not on behalf of himself, an injury to himself. He's sticking up for a coworker who he feels is mistreated by the administrator, and this is his boss. And that just really deeply impressed me. And then I remember later around Christmas time, he took me with him to go shopping for wine. He was a French teacher, and he loved French wine, and he bought 2 really expensive bottles of French wine to take to someone at where he worked. And so I went with him when he went to take them, and I'm thinking it's going to be some muckety-muck, some big person. And we go in the basement, and we keep walking around the basement all the way till we get to the boiler room, and he gives the man, the custodian, a big beer hug and hands him these 2 very expensive bottles of wine. And they're just happy and talking and good friends. And that's the kind of guy my dad was. He didn't believe in being status, that he believed everybody was equal and everyone deserved to be treated with dignity, and he was going to stick up for them, and I'm sure that took a toll on his heart. So I was 19 when he died. I was at Michigan State. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I thought I wanted to be a veterinarian, but I didn't want to be a veterinarian, and I decided I was going to be a union organizer and follow in his footsteps. So fast forward 10 years. I graduated from Michigan State with an employment relations degree and a master's in labor and industrial relation, and I go and become a union rep and a union organizer. And I'm working at, I won't mention the place, but it's a big box store that's open 24 hours in the Metro Detroit area. And I'm representing workers there. And I had made a decision to represent lower income workers where a lot of women worked, and that was my calling. So I was working a midnight shift, walking around just talking to people, finding out what's going on, and a woman came to me and she's very upset. And I'm talking to her, and alone in the break room, and she's telling me how this one boss, this midnight shift manager, is making her mop the floors instead of stocking the shelves. Now this is a better paying job, midnight shift, it's male dominated, and she's being told every night to mop the floors. And they didn't ask the other few women, white women, to do it. She's a black woman, and she felt this was an affront to her and an insult, and she was humiliated, and she felt alone because she was the only black woman on the shift. So I decided to talk to other people about what was going on, and I found out that this guy was an asshole. I also found he was the drinking buddy of the store director and had hired him, and he thought he could get away with murder. I talked to another woman who said, and was very reluctant, wouldn't have talked to me unless I approached her first, that this same manager would ridicule her. She was, anyway, they would make fun of her breasts. And would tell jokes in front of the other guys, and everybody would seem to laugh along, and she told him to stop, but he wouldn't, and she needed the job. She had 3 kids, and she didn't know what to do, and she just shut up, but it was only getting worse. And I talked to some of the men that he would single out and that he would curse at them. He would pull them in the back room and curse at them. He would yell at people on the shop floor, on the sales floor, which is incredibly humiliating if you've ever worked in retail, because you can't yell back. If you yell back, you're going to lose your job. So you have to just stand there and take it. So did things like this, and then in the process of me investigating, there was one young man who decided to tell him to stop. He said, "You have to stop treating people like this." And so this manager took him in the back room by the time clock and just cursed at him so loud and so repeatedly and wouldn't stop. And when he finally had enough and he yelled back and cursed back, the manager fired him for insubordination. And nobody in the place wanted to stick their neck out. They were all afraid. They would kiss up to him or they would lay low. That was kind of the thing. So I met with a few people, and I had this idea that, oh man, I brought some little union pads, little notepads, little pens, and I told everybody to start writing down things. And when he's acting like this, you write it down. And at first people were reluctant, and then more and more people started to do it, and it freaked this manager out completely. And when people started to see this manager being freaked out because they were just writing down notes whenever he's acting like an asshole, it was transforming. It was transforming. People started to laugh, and they started to have this sense of camaraderie, and they started doing it more, and they started doing things on their own. Like when he would come to the break room to sit down, they would all get up and walk away from the table. And they were happy about it. And the woman who was crying to me about the jokes was now laughing. And they decided to start a petition, and they sent it to the regional manager over the store director's head, and they wrote down all the complaints, and that regional manager decided he would come down, and both of those people, the store director and the midnight manager, would have to meet with them and every individual and answer to every complaint. Eventually, we got that midnight manager fired. Yes. And it was a joyous occasion. And they offered that young man who had stood up his job back. And then people, they always ask me, why do I pay union dues? What am I paying union dues for? And it's always hard for me to explain. You don't get a sack of potatoes or a trip to Disney World. What you get is an institution and an organization that's dedicated to looking out for working people, people that are run by people like me, people like you, who care about sticking their neck out for other people, whether it be on the shop floor or fighting people like Donald Trump and fighting against this whole, and fighting for women in this Me Too movement. It's an organization in this country, in this institution, that we have to preserve and protect. And I thank my father for teaching me that.